With week 3 in the rear view and week 4 on the horizon, we have officially reached the turning point of the split, where teams decide their direction. Push forward and chase to the top, or slip back and fight for survival. Every match becomes a choice, and the wrong decision could define the rest of the season. Welcome to Tilt-Proof League of Legends, episode 3, with myself, Leo Slayer Silverman, and Shibby hopping on as we make our introductions. At least this is hilarious for me, Shibby, because I have yet to be able to cast a Division 1 game, and I am debuting on Tilt-Proof. But Shibby, you've been on a couple of casts. Let the people know who have been watching Tilt-Proof a little bit more about yourself, my friend.
Yeah, we're not Alkin grapes. Even if you squint really hard, we unfortunately don't really look like them.
Nope, that won't help them at all.
No, yeah, but don't worry, we'll give you the same rundown here. Yeah, obviously, I've been on cast Slayer. You're a gadget guy, right? You're kind of like you're here, you're there, you're helping us out with stories, you're doing everything else. You'll get the cast eventually, but yeah, obviously, you guys have heard me. You guys have heard me cast before. If you're familiar with the collegiate scene, you would definitely hear me on like NECC or the collegiate broadcast, stuff like that. I've definitely been in and around the collegiate scene for a while, which is why I think Division 1 hired you and me, Slayer, because you were a big part of 2 years ago, the collegiate broadcast. That was like, I think, your big debut.
That was. I would actually very heavily consider it that. The one final test, as we now meme around the Salty Rum Bag. Shout out to that crew, especially the office hours for Grapes and Hawk, who you guys are very familiar with here in Division 1. So yeah, they were a big break for me. Yeah, I'm Slayer. I'm Leo. Obvious sports fan in the back. I'm not even going to talk about the professional side of things. I'll just stick to the collegiate side. I am a recent Syracuse University graduate. Here's my diploma.
Ooh.
If anyone wants to dox me on that.
Did you just get that mailed in?
No, just have it sitting around nicely. So go orange on that front. Someday, I hope the QC sports scene will get into League of Legends. They just actually got into Valorant, so I got to talk to the Valorant squad here on the Division 1 side about some Valorant stuff for Qs. I graduated there, broadcast journalism, about 2.5 years ago now. Been casting all that time. Yeah, you'd be pretty familiar with me if you've watched any of the North American Challengers League qualifiers. That's where I got my start. I've done decent coverage on CLoL, very much thanks to Salty Runback's ability to give me that platform. And of recent, I am if you are for some reason a CLoL fan in North America and also an LPL fan on the absolute opposite time zone, you would have seen me on the LPL English coverage this year, which has been very fun. So I will be casting my first match this week. I don't want to spoil which match it will be for Division 1. We'll talk about it when we get further into the episode. But yeah, excited to get back on home soil and cast some of the greats the collegiate has to offer. Shibby, though, let's jump into our matchups and recaps from last week. We'll start out with the Utes taking on the Saints here. Utah versus St. Clair. A St. Clair 2-0, and I think the headline here, because obviously this was a match on paper we expect St. Clair to come away with the win on. But I think even our casters, our production, maybe everyone except St. Clair, we're a little surprised with the assignment switch up we had in this matchup, especially in game 2, Shibby. We had Lig and Flocon switching up duties. It was the 80 mid swap, and I gotta say, right, listen, League of Legends has had a lot of crazy swaps, right? We've seen players switch from jungle support if you're like a UST Dardoch guy. We've seen like 80 carry to support. We talk about Sven at the pro level. I haven't seen a lot of mid lane to 80 carry swap, and not one in the middle of a series either. That was pretty shocking.
If I had a nickel for every time I saw a mid laner play 80 carry or vice versa, I would have 2, because we get later into it. Maryville Spyrax actually played 80 carry last week as well. It's very interesting because St. Clair, obviously they are like shifting stuff around. We also had Alonzo in the jungle instead of Maddie for game 1. Alonzo was on the Ivern. Overall, I really liked St. Clair's kind of strategy in game 1. They ran like a Zeri, Lulu, Ivern comp. It was a very bot lane focused composition with Lig, and yeah, it got a little silly at the end. It's a crazy stat. The Utes mid laner Horizon ended up 14-0-3 on Vladimir. I'm like, and they lost. They lost the game, unfortunately. Like again, St. Clair were getting a little silly. They were getting a little I would say they're having fun at the Nexus, and somehow, some way, the Utes were able to hold on to it until like I think it was like a 26 or 27-minute game. I legitimately thought St. Clair was going to drop that game to Utes because I saw like a 14-0 Vlad, and I was like, surely they just win. But yeah, I was very impressed with Horizon. He's very clearly, I think, Utes' best player, and I really like kind of watching him play and navigate the mid lane, especially going into someone like Flocon, who I think it's probably unilaterally agreed that he's one of the best mid laners, if not the best mid laner right now in Division 1.
Oh, I mean, you're not going to catch me saying anything opposite, Shibby. I have been a Flocon appreciator for a while.
Yes.
I would like to say, even before I believe he was officially a St. Clair mid laner, because I know he spent some time subbing in on the qualifier circuit for Tier 2 and a league on CCG, and that's where I got introduced to him. I would like to know a bit more about the logic between the lane swap. I will say, as much as credit as I want to give as an AD carry player myself, if you are going to roll swap into AD and play a game, Sivir might just be the most mind-numbing champ to play. Like, your role is very simple here. Don't die early, delete waves mid-game, and then win game late because you're 4 items and a bouncing boomerang half healths all the carries that are standing 500 feet away from you. So, yeah, Flocon, not surprising to me that he was able to coast decently. I think Miracle gets a lot of credit on this. I really like in the second game what Miracle was able to do as kind of just like lifting up all across the map. It's when we talk about Bard as a champion that you can pick, it's definitely one where the ability you can lean into roaming around the map and making plays constantly. It's like what people like to call the Bard shenanigans sort of idea. That's what Miracle was really able to do in this game. It made Flocon's lane very comfortable. It allowed Lig to get pretty comfortable in the mid lane, and they kind of just wait to scale up on this Victor Sivir and run the game over. So to see that swap come out, definitely eye catching, but makes a bit more sense knowing that they didn't try to take. Imagine they put Flocon on like Shibby. What if this guy tried to like play like Callista or like Draven, right? Or like there's no way this goes well. But Sivir, all right, I can swallow that pill.
Yeah, I mean, he went like 16-2. He got the week 3 MVP, right? Like, I mean, this guy, I love having MVP conversations, Slayer, in any sport, whether it's, traditional sports or it's esports, because you always get that conversation of like, is this person the most valuable player because he's most valuable to his team? And it's like, if you removed Flocon, how good would St. Clair be? Or is he the most valuable player if someone else here, maybe one of the Maryville players, because they're just so damn good, but is it their team making them look good? I love having those conversations, and I think it'll be really interesting, maybe as we get to the midway point after next week, to have those conversations with the rest of the gang, because I don't know, I'm just a fan of a guy putting the team on his back and clearly showing that without me, we wouldn't be here in this place.
I can confirm to all of our loyal Tilpro viewers that me and Shibby on multiple sport fronts have gone back and forth on MVP picks for this exact same reasons. Shibby, you talked a bit about Horizon. I also want to comment on the fact, being able to play these like unique picks, right? In this series, we saw it with the Vladimir, because I think what we've learned through Division 1 so far is obviously there are going to be like some skill gaps with some of these teams right now. So the question that's been really floating around is, how do you get an edge? How do you gain an edge? I think comfortability and champion flexibility is a really big point in it. So to see Horizon be able to fall on this Vladimir and do very, very well. We also see, Alawi come out in this game as well for the Utes later on in game 2. Like, are you also impressed by the ability to bring out these, Vladimir, these Alawi picks that aren't like screaming out in the meta and see some success against, again, a St. Clair program that was a pretty competitive program and should be in the seed-low conversations for championships going forward?
Yeah, I mean, St. Clair's Kings of the East, right? Like, they hold that title very firmly. And I think the way to beat some of these better teams, like we mentioned, Winthrop, St. Clair, Maryville, you kind of have to find these edges in matchup unfamiliarity, right? Like, I don't know how many times Ricky has faced off against an Alawi. Who knows how many times, Lig or Flocon has faced off against a Vladimir. And I think that's important, right? Because when you get to these teams, as we kind of move on to Ohio State kind of does something a little bit opposite, where they're just playing like kind of one-to-one matchups. They're not playing anything too crazy different into Winthrop, and it feels like Winthrop is almost always prepared to play up against like a Renekton, a Trundle, a Kaisa. If we talk about game 1, if we go into game 2, Ohio State's not playing anything too different. They're going Cassante, Pantheon, this kind of stuff. Like Denethor, Sword, these guys, they've been around the block for a while now. These are not unfamiliar champions to them.
No, yeah, without a doubt. So just going to keep track of that, see those champion flexibility, making sure we keep some of our, big title contending teams honest in these matchups, as there's so much importance in winning week to week here. Speaking on some of those Titan programs, we talked about St. Clair. We always like to call them the Kings of Canadian Collegiate League. Well, they have struggled to match up against another one of the opponents we'll talk about in our next matchup, that being Winthrop University, the Golden Eagles, as they also rolled to a 2-0 win over the Buckeyes, Ohio State. 2-0 in this one, Shibby, and I think the big talking point, I think Rapid subbing in here is a very interesting conversation to have, because Shibby, you and I, being integrated into the tier 3 scene for so long, we're pretty familiar with Rapid. It's probably been unknown for a while, his substitute status on Winthrop all of these years. He comes in, he plays. I'm gonna ask you, because you're a Jarvan guy. I mean, I thought this Jarvan game was up to the Shibby Casterlo standard. In game 1, I have to say.
I think he played a really good Jarvan. I think he played a really good jungle series, right? And it's really interesting because you've got this swapping around that's been happening with pretty much every team, right? Even at the top, Maryville is swapping junglers. Winthrop obviously swapping Rapid in for Wakal or Wilson. Look, I'm gonna bang the drum for Wilson anytime I get. I really like watching him play, but I feel like Rapid isn't bringing anything necessarily different at the moment, right? Typically, when you see Maryville's side, you have Music and Shimmer, who definitely have different specialties, right? You have a pseudo sword and shield kind of, concept with them. When I look at Rapid and when I look at, Wilson, Rapid's playing Jarvan and Vi. Those are Wilson champions, right? I've seen Wilson, just go crazy on Vi before, maybe a little too crazy at times here. So I'm really interested to see, and maybe you can talk to Artemis later about what the ideas are behind Rapid and having him in. Are we gonna focus Wilson on being more of a sword? Because I know he's got a pocket Viego. I know he's got a lot of carry jungler picks that this guy can play. Whereas Rapid, obviously, he's been around. Like you said, we're familiar with him. He's almost always been much more of a facilitator role, and that looks to empower players like Sword, players like Denethor, and obviously Mobility, who has come into his own as arguably one of the better ADs in Collegiate and just in the tier 2 ecosystem. So I'm really interested if it's more of a, hey, we want to have more of a facilitator on Winthrop rather than somebody like Wilson who can just kind of take over the game and maybe doesn't work well with Sword every single game and every single series.
Because it fits the identity of what you want from Winthrop, right? Yeah. This team is very propped up, I feel like, by their ability to kind of either stagnate a lane and play towards their strengths. That's how I describe Sword. We see him play, the Rise in game 2. That fits right into this bill. Orianna, like these kind of stalemate mid lanes where it's like, okay, I don't have to worry about Sword falling too far behind. He's going to scale. That's fine. Denethor is an absolute animal. Denethor is going to take control of whatever matchup he gets most of the time. We saw that happen, especially in the Mbessa game. He goes like one death Mbessa. That's always a problem. And then Mobility, consistently highest in goal difference at 15 minutes. I believe he's number 2 in the league right now. He has a very high, kill participation too. He's number 3 in creep score. Like, you don't gotta worry about mobility either. So what do you have to do as a jungler for Winthrop right now? Just be a force to create action. And Vi and Jarvan are 2 of the champions that are greatest at doing that, and I'm with you. Rapid or Wilson, either could fit that role. On the flip side of this matchup, though, Shibby, the Buckeyes, these 2 games are pretty lopsided, and I know a lot of people were, very, very adamant that, and in support of what we saw from Five Fire in some of these early Buckeyes matchups. Up against Sword, again, maybe part of it's we talked about Sword. It's really hard to kind of knock off of his block, get him a little bit uncomfortable in the lanes. Maybe it's the fact that Rapid made it a point to kind of punish Five Fire in this matchup. I mean, he has 14 deaths across the 2 series. What did you see from a guy that we thought could be, we expect to be a staple piece for the Buckeyes in this series of weeks past that we didn't really get to see up against Winthrop this time around?
Yeah, I think Ohio State is definitely that level separator right now that we have in Division 1, where you have like Maryville, Winthrop, St. Clair kind of sitting on that little bracket themselves. Maryville probably a little bit higher up, if you ask most of the people here. And then you have Ohio State, and then you've got like Stony Brook, West Virginia, Utah, and then you've got Boise State, right? And then Ohio is kind of like that litmus test, I would argue. And this has been the issue, I think, with Ohio State and just teams from maybe lesser known conferences, right? They compete in the MEC. I've casted the MEC multiple years
Oh yeah,
prior, and
MEC
I'm
vet
very
over here.
familiar. Yeah, I'm an MEC vet. I'm an MEC stan. Like, if you don't
Yep.
know, I cheer for my boys, because definitely there are conferences and stuff that are a little bit less attuned to having like really good play and having solid competition. So when I look at Ohio State and I look at them, matching up against teams like St. Clair, matching up against Winthrop, yeah, that's where I think the term or the saying, like, there are levels to this game, really gets to show, right? Like, obviously, Maryville versus Stony Brook, we're going to see a big difference. But when you have programs like Ohio State, programs like St. Clair, all who make collegiate top 32, all who can compete at that level, you really start to see the differences. And I think that's where Five Fire kind of understands, like, this guy's been in the system for a long time, right? He was a tier 2 prospect for a long time. And when he faces off against kind of the up and coming generation, I'll say people like Flocon, people like Toasty, and in Winthrop's case, you have Sword, who's kind of been around the block as well. Yeah, it's tough. And I think with Ohio State as well, we talked about all the roster swapping and all these teams doing stuff. I think for a team like Ohio State, who's definitely on that like bubble team, I would argue, they've really got to get their roster locked together, because they're not just swapping out their bottom lanes, right? And we have Ruler and Delight. We've got their junglers being swapped out, and they're going to head into the tougher part of their schedule. Like, they faced Winthrop. I think they got Maryville, St. Clair in the next couple weeks. They've done the quote unquote like easier games, we'll call them, but they really need to understand what 5 guys they're going to play with and stick with for the rest of this season. Look, I don't doubt they'll make playoffs, but there is a world, if they're not all put together, that Stony Brook just leapfrogs them into that 4th place spot. I don't think that's a crazy thing to say.
No, I don't think it is either. That's going to be a very important matchup to track as this split goes on, because like you talked about, even the standings reflected, right? It's 2-1 Stony Brook, 2-1 Buckeyes, and 2-1 St. Clair. The only thing game difference separating those squads right now. But we talked a little bit about our sports love, Shibby, already. I mean, a program like the Ohio State Buckeyes, it's a program that definitely, I believe, always strives for the greatest things. So start locking down that roster, get some succinct games with the squads in Division 1. And yeah, we could really be talking about Ohio State is one of those teams to kind of move around that big 3 that we came into Division 1 looking at. So we'll have to see. They've got some time, but time is ticking. And we already kind of talked about the other squad that's head-to-head with them right now. And that goes into our next matchup to talk about from Week 3. It is another 2-0. And the least shocking thing of all, it is Maryville on the 2-0 side of it. But it is Stony Brook, another team, Shibby, that a lot of people are starting to get behind and feel like we're seeing some improvements as the season goes on. Did you see any of those reflected in this series for Stony Brook as we talk about who can really try and challenge one of those top 3 teams in Division 1?
I think it's tough, right? I think anyone is going to look less competitive when they're matching up against Maryville University. I think that's just unfortunately a fact when you are on kind of those like, bottom 4 standings. I like Stony Brook. They're one of the programs that I really enjoy watching when they competed last year in CLOL Nationals, right? They've always been a team that's been very interesting. I believe they also competed in SR's Battle of the Bubble where we got to see them. So that was really cool. Like, these guys want to compete, right? They want to get better. They want to go up against, better competition. And again, when you go up against a team like Maryville, who's kind of trying to figure out their roster at the moment, whereas Stony Brook, they've been running the same 5 essentially since week 1. So that's what I'm saying, where I talk about Stony Brook potentially leapfrogging Ohio State and hitting that 4th place spot. I mean, they're a team that I think, as long as they keep playing together, as long as they keep, figuring out what team compositions that are appropriate for their team, understanding how to play together. Yeah, I think this is a team that will just get better and better, right? I love their mid laner. I think it was Yanahama Sila, I think is his name, which is a crazy name. Yeah, I don't feel
Yanahama Sila. Yeah. It's like it's that's the name. That's your week 2 MVP, right? So listen, reality is a swift, cruel mistress. You get MVP week 2, and then you got to go against Toasty, who I know I was starting to talk about some stats for mobility, one of our other big hitters. I mean, Toasty's also up here in some very high metrics. I think he's 2 right now in creep score at like 252 average. That's big. Toasty's another guy. If you want to be considered a big-time prospect in the mid lane for CLOL, there is no better guy to go up against right now. Why I think he's such a big hurdle for mid laners in Division 1 to get over is because he's going to be here a while, man. Like, Spyrax, Sword, they've been in CLOL for a hot minute. Toasty just got here, and Toasty was already proving at the tier 2 level that he was a threat before he kind of got over to Maryville. So this is the wake up call a lot of players are going to get when they go up against Toasty. I think particularly in this series, what we saw from when it came down to Yamanama Sila's champion pool, really likes to lean into those scalers. But who is it to terrorize him trying to scale Shibby? It's Shimmer. Like the Rengar pick is gross. Like playing Vigar against a Jarvan is just not fun at all. And we kind of saw Maryville's plan was, oh, all right, we are not letting mid lane beat us. There's no world where we fall behind at any point of the game against mid lane. And you know what? I think that the thing to take away if you are Stony Brook is that's a respect factor. Your mid lane is garnering respect from the best team in CLoL right now.
Yeah, I love it. And I know we've talked a lot about mid lane and kind of the impact it's had, obviously, in Division 1. I've just been happy that regardless of the team, regardless of the matchup, I don't know if it's because of the nature of bot lane Slayer, and you can obviously speak to it a lot more. These guys are willing to scrap, and we're getting like 1 for 2s, 2 for 2s. Like, it doesn't matter if it's Utah versus St. Clair, Maryville versus Stony Brook. Like, they're willing to like hands check you at any moment. And I love I'm going to say ego from all of these bot laners. It doesn't matter who they're facing. Like the fact that they are willing to be like, I see a kill angle. Like I think you're misplaying. I'm going to jump on your head with Tristana, or I'm going to dive in as Kaisa. Right. I've been really enjoying that. And I think bot lane is like a hyperbolic time chamber in Division 1. Like we're going to see all of these guys as the weeks go on. Like they're just going to get better and better and better mechanically. And I think we have some of the best bot lanes in CLoL overall, right? Like, I mean, mobility is just an insane AD carry. The only one missing from this group is an AD carry that can arguably match or is even better than mobility. And we might get him later on, in years to come.
Yeah. I'm with you. I think a great prevailing thought is the strongest role right now in Division 1, I do think is bottom. Okay, this is cheating. I'm saying bottom lane, not like a lane, like not AD carry or support, because I do think it's close. I might actually even give the edge slightly to support, mainly because of we kind of talked about him. We didn't get talked about him too much during the Winthrop series. We kind of skated over him mainly because he played a really good role. But it's the younger up and coming support players. That is being headlined by Cryogen and Only 35. These two are, first of all, Only 35 is one of the most fun guys to just get quotes from.
Yes.
About his acclamation to America. It's been very, very fun to watch Only 35 embrace a lot of the American culture. I think I actually saw him tweet today. This is a direct quote, by the way. He tweeted, "White monster for gains," and he's just holding a giant white monster, and he's about to go to the gym. If that's not more like American, like 20-year-old American, then I don't really know what is. My point being here, to get back to our matchup, Shibby, is that Keitong is a very reliable support, and I've enjoyed seeing him go up against Cryogen. I think him, like this Stony Brook bottom lane, Chubby Pig and Keitong, they are the driving force. And what's interesting is that the meta is in such a hyper carry spot with 80 carries that I do think Stony Brook can pick up a lot of wins against a lot of opponents, just picking, the Sivir, leaning into this Zeri. Maybe we'll see Yunara come out. Jinx is on a very strong point in this patch right now. So I'd love to see Chubby Pig and Keitong lean into those matchups fully and just kind of say, Stony Brook, listen, let's glide to 3 items on AD, protect him, and we'll win ourselves a lot of games and maybe leapfrog Ohio State Buckeyes like you're talking about, Shibby.
Yeah, I love that. And just to quickly go over our last match here with West Virginia versus Boise State, another one, a bit of a back and forth. It was a 2-0, like you mentioned, Slayer, but Boise State is just getting better and better. Like week 1 Boise to week 3 Boise. I know a lot of people look at this team. Yeah, I like straight up. I don't know what Kelsey's doing, but she's got to keep doing it because they are just getting fundamentally better week after week after week. And their bot lane, again, I talk about Boise State's bot lane, they're willing to scrap. Like, I was kind of surprised when I was looking at the match, when I was watching, I was like, oh man, these guys got some hands. Like, they're not afraid to do anything. Boise State's biggest advantage here is a team just kind of trying to count them out, maybe looking over them. Like, again, I would not disrespect a team like Boise State, who has, like, just been getting fundamentally better and better. I like the comps that they're running. They're dumbing it down a little bit, which is what you do when you have such a new League of Legends squad. You dumb down the champions, you make it a very easily executable team fight composition, and you just watch as your players who are definitely good mechanically see what they can do, see how they test up against a team like West Virginia. Then you start teaching the macro. Then you start teaching, here we rotate on this, we're going to play for this objective, blah 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 blah. Like West Virginia, I know the box score says 2-0, but they definitely sweat for it. It wasn't an easy game.
Yeah, and to shout out some Broncos here. Talking about bottom lanes, leading into that again. Asteria, number 4 on that creep score out. I know I've said it a lot, but guys, that is actually the bread and butter, especially of the AD role, especially in early lanes. Like, I'm all for the scrapping, that's fun, but I would rather be 50 CS up in 0-2 than the 2-0 guy in my lane, because it's just such an important stat for those AD carries. So the fact that Asteria is up that high with the likes of Mobility, Scary Jerry, like those are the other guys on this list, that is big for Boise, and it's a great company to keep. So big win to get if you are the Mountaineers as well, to finally get on the board. But yeah, that series was definitely the scrappiest one, and that does let us arrive at a quick chat on our standings. Shibby, we alluded a little bit to how we feel about where these teams are at, but we'll just go for formality's sake through all them. It's Maryville at the top at 3-0, only undefeated team so far. They have a 3-win streak as well behind them. Winthrop and St. Clair are both 2-1 behind them, currently tied for second, alongside the Buckeyes coming off of their only loss to Maryville. So we have 3 teams at 2-1. That'll be fun to watch as we start talking about seedings for playoffs down the line. And then it is Stony Brook coming up as well, tied with them at 2-1. West Virginia then, unfortunately, at 1-2, have to be 6th because there's so many teams tied for second above them. And then the Utah Utes and Boise State Broncos, both 0-3, looking for their first win. Shibby, really quickly, looking at those standings, I know you've said a couple of your points about the standings already, but I just want to get your impression on what you think of these standings as we currently look to enter week 4.
Hot take, Maryville might be first place. They might end up first. I know, crazy guys, insane.
Whoa!
But I think the more interesting conversations is the Stony Brook, Ohio State, where it's like who's gonna fight for 4th. But I haven't been shy about my belief in St. Clair. I love Flocon. I love Maddie. I love these guys. I think Maddie had a massive step up in the jungle last, when he was competing in the qualifiers not too long ago. And I was like, man, this guy is like so good. Like, I can't wait to watch him in St. Clair this year. And I think there's a very real possibility with Winthrop still trying to find their jungle out when they're doing the swapping of Rapid and Wilson. Like, St. Clair isn't swapping anybody around too much. I think their best roster when it is Ricky, when it is, Maddie, Flocon, Lig, these guys, right? St. Clair, that 5 that we talk about, if it goes up against a Rapid jungle Winthrop, Eagles, there's a very real possibility that St. Clair take this matchup. It's not going to happen this week. It's going to be the next week. But that's where I'm looking at, where like Winthrop could easily drop down to 3rd place and they might stay there.
That's why you gotta get Shibby on Tiltproof here. Is he gives you the hot takes. It almost makes me like want to be the normal guy, because Shibby kind of steals my hot takes, and well, I don't want to say steals because he thinks of them on his own. But here's the thing. This is the funniest part about us on Tiltproof, is that I do think we are some of the biggest St. Clair sympathizers that I think Div 1 casters have. So you're gonna get a lot of that coming from us, very much pointed towards St. Clair's success. Because we really do believe in this squad as a huge CLOL contender, and most importantly, a Division 1 contender as this year goes on. Shibby, though, talking about these 0-3 teams, right? Because we're talking about, I kind of want to talk about like mental resets, or what you want to see approach by the Utah Utes and Boise State Broncos as we go into week 4 and beyond. I'll start by saying, for Boise State, I do think it's as simple as just getting some of these drafts that are very simplistic. I just want to see them keep leaning into hyper carry picks, right? And they've gotten it right a bit here. Like, I like playing Zeri Soraka, but putting Yorick into Fury with it, that doesn't necessarily combine the comp as you want. Those are 2 sides of the map that want to play very differently throughout the game. I just want to see them lean into Asteria fully here, right? Like, get me a Scion in the top lane, man. Get me a Jarvan, like a support pick in the jungle, sort of facilitator pick. Support, like a Soraka's fine, and then pick a hyper carry. I think Boise State could win at least a game, if not a series, doing that. So that's how I would like to see them reset. Is there something you'd like to see from the Utes to try and let them maybe mental reset, game plan reset, just some sort of something new brought in to week 4?
In the same way that you kind of suggested that Boise State leading to Asteria there, I think just giving as much resource as you can to Horizon in terms of like setting him up for success, right? Running a solid jungle, mid jungle 2v2. Because in game 1, when they faced off against St. Clair, the game where he was Vladimir, they had a Wukong jungle, right? Like it is kind of a team fight composition. You've got Gragas and Lucian and that kind of stuff. And then when you head into game 2, they ran the Nocturne Ori, and I love Nocturne Ori. I think a lot of people think it's overrated at the moment. It's not as good as it used to be, but into Victor specifically, right? You could easily get those combos off. Unfortunately for Utah, they ran into Maddie and Lig, who was on Jarvan and Victor. And like Chaos Storm plus Cataclysm is a little rough to lane against. It's a little rough to play against here, especially like you said, when you're pairing it up with stuff like Ilawi, you've got Smolder in the bot lane. Like I get what they're trying to do, but imagine, Narwhal is on something like a Malphite, right? Imagine Wizward is on something a little bit more burst heavy. So when you land that Nocturne Ori combo, you've got the extra bit of burst to come in. I think that's where you start looking at team composition, start looking at your drafts and saying, we like this works, let's combine this with this, right? Really understanding. And obviously I think looking to pro play and looking at what are these guys, what are they running, right? We've got Worlds coming up very, very soon. I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing Worlds compositions coming into Division 1, right? Some of these champions that maybe aren't seen as often on the world stage, and then they kind of pop in. It's like, oh, this guy's OP, like Singed or some random stuff like that. Yeah, I think it'll trickle down into Division 1. So I really want, like you mentioned, both the Utes and Boise State to kind of dumb down how they are approaching the game and towards the draft. And I don't mean dumb down as like a negative aspect. I just mean it as a sort of like, hey, let's run like a double front line, CC orientated support. Let's run a high burst mid laner, and let's run something like you said, a scaling bottom lane, right? Let's try to figure that out, and let's just see what we can work on from there. Because ultimately, a majority of League of Legends is going to come down to team fighting, whether you like it or not. Very few teams win through split push. We see it even at the highest levels, right? I mean, you mentioned it yourself, so you're an LPL caster. You've seen worse teams just win because they are mechanically very good at team fighting, and they catch these better teams slipping up.
Yeah, it could definitely happen. And yeah, taking for pro play is a big thing. But again, it's a very hard thing to do, especially in the fall split, right? Where we get to spring, we're going to build up to this very big LAN event and crown like a very big overarching champion. CLOL is made through the spring. So I feel like the fall for a lot of these programs, it's just getting yourself, the simple things locked down. A starting 5 consistently that you can then start to understand champion pools, and most importantly, how those reflect in the meta as well, like you're talking about with pro play. Because I think it's a good balance of let's get some styles that we see in pro play, but also incorporating champion pools. Because me and Shibby can sit here and literally try and draft for a bunch of these teams in Division 1, but there are certain champions that players are going to be stronger on, and leaning into those as well is going to be a more important thing. And that is what I have at least came into treating the fall split somewhat for Division 1, with some of these newer teams and newer programs coming together, at least from a roster standpoint, to get some of that cohesion going, and then we could see them really rise up when it comes to the spring. So I think those are great points, especially to be made for both Boise and the Utes. The question now becomes, Shibby, do we start to see some of those wins manifest for those squads in week 4? Let's start diving into our week 4 matchups here, Shibby. Our first one up here on Sunday, October 5th. We talked a bit about them. Buckeyes versus St. Clair. This will be a very fun matchup, mainly because I'm just curious to see how creative St. Clair is going to get with some of these lane assignments again. I want to learn more about why they look for these angles. Is it as simple as like, League is really good on Victor, we want to play a Victor game? Or is there like more to it? Is there certain styles that St. Clair want to play? Will we see that come out against the Buckeyes? Because they can really just completely warp not only St. Clair's game plan, but like Ohio State's as well. When you talk about how much they lean on their mid laner to be such a big carry point for this squad.
Yeah, I think that's for sure the match of the weekend, right? Like if we're looking at everything else, and I'm interested to see, like you mentioned, Ohio State coming in here and potentially doing an upset, right? Because like I said, all these teams have competed, or at least not all these teams, but the two teams that we're talking about have competed at the top 32 level, right? Like obviously St. Clair has had higher and higher aspirations. They've won the East multiple times. Ohio State struggled a bit in the MEC last split, their first time in the MEC. But like again, all these players, these are like challenger level players, right? These grandmaster level players. Like they understand how to play the game. And if St. Clair is still swapping stuff around, I don't think this is the match to do it. Like I don't think that's smart, right? It
No.
needs to be Ohio State kind of coming in with that 5-man roster, like I mentioned, figuring out what 5 you want to play again, because it's St. Clair this week, right? Next week they get into Stony Brook. The week after that it's West Virginia, and they end off with Maryville. They need to come away in these next 4 weeks with a 2-2 record. I think for them, that's going to be very, very important. The easier, quote unquote, 2-2 is obviously taking the victories over Stony Brook and West Virginia. But imagine they kind of win those games and they come off with an upset here in St. Clair. They might secure their spot in third, which is a very interesting prospect, because then that obviously changes how the seeding works, and it's going to be, where the playoff matchups happen. Like we could get some really wonky matchups here. So this is a game for Ohio State where I genuinely think they need to win, whereas St. Clair, obviously they need to win it too. You want to win, but like St. Clair has a much easier path in the next couple of weeks. So I'm very interested to see how Five Fire steps up against Flocon, who, in my opinion, has been one of the most valuable players in all of Division 1. But also, how does Ohio State's bot lane match up against St. Clair, whichever version they decide to run, whether it's the Lig, the Lig and a Miracle version, or it's going to be the Lig and Ziz's version, right? Like whatever it's going to be, they need to figure that out.
Without a doubt. I'm glad. First of all, thank you for covering me there, Shibby. This is without a doubt match of the week. Right off rip.
Yes.
First game you're going to get, first series. This is going to be match of the week. And also, touch on a bit further how you're talking about leading into what this series means and then looking forward. I even just looking into week 5, right, as we talk about the 4-way tie and then factor in how we're tiering these teams right now. MU's at the top, Maryville all alone. But then the tier 2 is, we would consider St. Clair and Winthrop. That is a week 5 matchup, okay? And then we talk about tier 3 right now. You would say Ohio State Buckeyes, and then you've got Stony Brook. That is a week 5 matchup. So for momentum's sake, if you're St. Clair, you want to bring momentum into that Winthrop matchup. If they take on Boise, so you're expecting Winthrop to be 3-1. You need to be 3-1 if you want to keep up the second place conversations. For, Ohio State versus Stony Brook plays the other 0-3 team this week. We'll get into it later, but they're playing the Utah Utes. So you're kind of expecting, at least on record right now and where we think of form, that Stony Brook would be coming in at 3-1. That just puts there's a lot of pressure, more so on the Buckeyes, I would agree, but also on St. Clair to keep up in their respective races when we talk about the tier lists of Division 1 so far here. Flocon, I hope Flocon plays both games here, because I really think his aggressive style on the melee mid laners will be a decent problem for Five Fire. I would like to see Ohio State prioritize getting him on Talia, so you can kind of negate the Flocon Yone trying to come through here. Silas is in a pretty nice spot. I know Silas and Kiana are junglers right now, but I still think of them as kind of strong assassins that if you'd like to pick in a confident match with the Flocon go for. So if we get Talia here for Five Fire, get him in a comfortable spot, that's a big matchup. I'm also curious to see what top lane looks like, because if we know anything about Maddie on the St. Clair side, this guy will slam Darius and kind of just try and run through the entire lane. So that's a big thing that you also have to cover for the Buckeyes. I think solo lanes are a big strength that Ohio State are going to have to try and cover for in this match of the week.
I'm interested. I'm interested to see how St. Clair approaches this, because the easy way is to just slam mid jungle and look at Five Fire and kind of, put him on tilt a little bit, right? Take his lunch money, shove him in the locker, that kind of deal. And it's worked before against other teams that have faced off against Ohio State. But yeah, like you mentioned, their week 5 matchups are very, very important. So that's definitely, I think, the most important match, because it has so much implications leading up to the next couple of weeks, especially with how both of these teams, 2 teams specifically, Ohio State and St. Clair, have their next couple of weeks prior to playoffs. Like, they both obviously want to come away with a win, because they're going to be facing off against essentially their arch nemesis for second place and 4th place respectively.
Without a doubt. And listen, everyone, I'm not going to pretend like it doesn't exist, all right, for Sundays. We're football fans here, right? We understand the full football slate's going. There's going to be full-on Division Series baseball action going on Sunday. I can guarantee you, myself, Shibby, and everyone up at Div 1 is going to be locked in on this matchup. It is can't miss TV. I don't care what sports allegiances you bring to a fall Sunday. You are not going to want to miss Ohio State versus St. Clair. And then, like we talked about with these arch nemesis, right when one tries to shine in the Buckeyes, you've got Stony Brook that steps up right next. So that's our next matchup for Sunday. Stony Brook taking on the Utah Utes. 0-3 Utah Utes. We kind of talked about what you wanted to see from them leaning into Horizon. Is that the road for them to find an upset here? Because we have talked about Stony Brook as maybe a bottom lane, another one of those bottom lane focused teams. So is bottom lane versus mid lane success kind of how you're looking at this matchup, Shibby, between our two squads?
This has the inklings of a trap game, right? Like this is scary for Stony Brook. Not in the sense of like, I doubt anyone in this league is underestimating their opponent. But you look at a team like Utah, who's 0-3, right? You look at them, Stony Brook's looking. I'm like, okay, yeah, we can just kind of be a little lackadaisical. Maybe we don't have to scrim as much. Maybe I don't need to play as much solo queue, that kind of stuff. But again, Horizon. In my opinion, the Utes' best player can easily come in here and look to, maybe mess up Stony Brook, who's coming off of a loss, right? Who, again, we talked about the mid lane matchup, we talked about the bottom lane matchup. These two bottom lanes are gonna scrap. Like, I expect a very high kill game from both of these teams, and when it comes into those scenarios, Horizon ending with 14 kills and 0 deaths, like 26-minute game into St. Clair. That's St. Clair that he's doing that into. Stony Brook is not St. Clair, right? Like, if that happens, there's a very real chance the Utes come back and just absolutely pull off the upset, like you mentioned, because, again, it is just, in my opinion, a trap game.
Yeah, you know what? Trap game, that's a good one. I didn't even think to talk about those trap games. This is 100% a trap game for Stony Brook. So, listen, I hope that the Sea Wolves are able to... I think they should just lock in again to kind of... If they can play aggressively through bottom lane...
Yes.
I like them in this matchup. Mid lane is something to look out for, but the Chubby Pig and Ketong are really establishing themselves as one of those bottom lanes to talk about. If the Utes can try to slow them down, maybe Stony Brook has a chance. Maybe Utah has a chance, but as the Syracuse alum, I've got to stick with my New York pride, and I feel like Stony Brook will come out at 3-1 this one. We'll have to see, though. We'll have to see. Like you mentioned, chaotic matchups have happened for both of these teams so far through 3 weeks, and this one is brewing to be one of those. So that is a good, I guess I'd say a good dessert to what we think is the match of the week in the Buckeyes taking on the Saints. You roll into Monday. That first matchup is unfortunately if you opposite seeded the standings into a Swiss bracket, this was the matchup you get for playoffs. That would be the Maryville taking on West Virginia Mountaineers here. 3-0 versus 0-3. Shibby, what's the read?
Maryville right now, I think they can kind of look at this and take another roster shot, right? Like, they can see, do we want Music and Crimson back? Do we want Shimmer still in? Like, again, they have the privilege of being that 3-0 team where they can go, okay, yeah, let's experiment with the roster. Where are we gonna play Spyrax? I mean, Spyrax has played 3 different roles now. I don't know if he's trying to go for 5
All
roles
5.
in Division
Let's
1.
do it.
Yeah, let me see him in jungle. Let me see him in support. If Maryville's trying to do that, they are just really trying to figure out where this guy's gonna go. And again, West Virginia, whatever iteration of Maryville they're going to have to face, they can't take lightly. Whether it's going to be the roster that we're so used to, or maybe the one that we're thinking about, with Shimmer and Toasty and Spyrax in the top side, or they're going to do something a little bit different, and they're going to throw Crimson up there. They're going to put Spyrax at the AD carry role. Maybe Scary J doesn't even play. Who knows? Like, West Virginia have to be on their A game. I think what you want to see from West Virginia is a competitive early game, right? That's where you can get some of these teams and you can kind of understand, like, okay, Maryville, their early games have been a little shaky, right? Look, Maryville's not perfect. I know they're 3-0, but their early games have been a little shaky against some of the top teams. There is an angle where West Virginia, I'm not going to say wins the series or wins the game, but I wouldn't be surprised if I see like a 1K gold lead from West Virginia at like the 14-minute mark, right? That's not completely out of the ballpark here. So that's where I think you can look to take advantage. I think if you're going to run like those, maybe those simpler scaling compositions that we talked about, you're just going to play into Maryville's hands, and they're just going to out-team fight you at the end.
It's tough, right? Because like players like Aeolius plays, like, I really was impressed by this Swain game. which kind of plays into the scaling. That's like nullifying lane. They get like the Mundo Swain Udyr comp. Like, hey guys, like we've preached a lot about synergy within your composition. Those top three, like the top side of that, should be they all want to play the same game, survive and thrive. So like, I loved seeing that draft come out from WVU. But like you're saying, you pick that into Maryville. Shibber's gonna play like some sort of lethality assassin. You're gonna get like Toasty playing some maniacal mid lane that will run you over. It just will not work against Maryville. But hey, I also don't hate kind of trying to stick to that style and test it against the best of the best, right? Because if you're going to test a cohesive comp, there's no better opponent to do against than Maryville to see how you will fare against other opponents. Because this is their toughest matchup. A lot of people aren't expecting them to get the win here up against Maryville, but you want to build for those future matchups that West Virginia is going to have to look at. But that leads us to our final matchup of the week here. That is going to be Winthrop Golden Eagles taking on the Boise State Broncos. Again, a big game for Winthrop because they still want to stay competitive with St. Clair, and this is definitely one that they should be favored coming into, but hey, if we want to talk about bottom lanes again, Shibby, it's been the prevailing theme of our episode, it feels like, and I'm a fan of it.
Yeah.
I'll lean into the marksman more. Asteria versus Mobility, those are two of the best guys when it comes to farming in this game right now, in this league right now. And do you feel like, dare I say, Mobility has a little bit to be worried about? Probably not, but this is definitely the matchup when it comes to Boise State versus Winthrop, the 80 carries in this one.
I think Mobility is going to want to show why he's number 2 and the other guy's number 3. You know what I mean? Like, I think Mobility is going to come into this.
Yeah.
Mobility is not the kind of person in my mind that's going to completely disrespect his opponents, right? He's not going to come in here and like not take this seriously. He's a prim proper professional in every single right, and he's gonna come in here and he's gonna give me the business, bro. Like he's gonna come in Lucian, right? Oh, give me Zaya, give me. If you're gonna give me my best champions, I'm going to run them into you. I'm not going to try to experiment. I'm not going to play something weird here. So again, yeah, I love Asteria. I love the leaning into the bottom lane, like you mentioned, running these like wacky vein compositions, the Tristana with the front line, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I think this is going to be Asteria's like real taste of like, that's why he's played at the tier 2 level. That's why Winthrop University is always a shoe-in for top 4 at collegiate. Like this is one of those kind of games, like I've talked about it before. You realize there's levels to this, and you realize how much more you have to climb, right? How big the mountain is, or how high the peak is. And again, I want to see Boise State run something simple, run those team fight compositions, see what you can do against Winthrop, see how you stack up mechanically and where you can go. Because again, if you look good here, if you go into Winthrop and you secure like a team fight win, or you find an angle where they're not paying attention, that's a big win for you guys, especially for a program that's so new. It's all about laying the foundation and laying the building blocks for success. And when you get to play teams like this who are at like kind of the top of the mountain, surely there's something you can take away and learn from it. Like it's not impossible.
Again, kind of like we talked about with the when it came down to the West Virginia Maryville matchup, I like it sucks because we've been preaching the identity thing. Scaling is a kind of identity that Boise have shown, but unfortunately, I don't know how much they can get away with when it comes to this matchup. And the way I want to focus on that is with top lane, right? Because 7-2-7-4, like he showed in the last matchup. Yeah, I'll play the Ornn. I'll play the Maokai. Don't worry about what my lane looks like. I'm not going to fall too far behind, and hopefully I scale to be a team fighter, right? Oh, boy. That strategy into Denethor, it doesn't work a lot of the time, especially with where, like, Mbessa is in the meta. Like, Denethor's going to slam that. He may pull a Pocket Camille out there for the real ball knowers. Like, he'll go play Camille. Jax, like, these are picks that will kind of run over their matchups. So playing these scaling tanks will worry me a bit in this matchup. I don't know. Denethor is a tough one. And also Denethor, we've been getting quotes from Winthrop. Denethor feels like right now, last week the whole team showed up in a big team win. And if they all show up, nobody can beat them. If they're feeling like that, Shibby, I do not want to play them. I do not want to play them in a week, if those are the quotes coming out from Camp Denethor.
Yeah, I think Winthrop, obviously every year, is very, very confident, but there is definitely something a little bit different about this team, right? They're definitely walking in with a different form of swagger, I would argue. I mean, they made a monstrous losers bracket run last year in CLOL, so they were so close, right? They were third place last year. They're not going to be satisfied with that anymore, right? The core of this team has played together for long enough where their aspirations year in year out are always going to be CLOL championship, and they have another league here in Division 1 where they can face off against some of the best, right? They face off against last year's winner in Maryville. They get to face off against St. Clair, which is not normal for them. They get to kind of, iron sharpens iron, and I love that Winthrop is taking full advantage of every single opportunity because I don't know, man. They are right now the hungriest team to me in CLOL at the moment.
Yeah, it does feel like that core needs to put together the year, especially the springtime that Winthrop is always approached as being their big time to perform. And Div 1's the place to try and show that up in the fall and then lead it into the spring. So I'm with you. Definitely the Golden Eagles are the hungriest for a trophy without a doubt here. But I definitely feel like they are going to be favored coming into that matchup against Boise. But hey, we said Boise's been scaling up well. It'll be a fun watch regardless. Can't miss action as always on Division 1 Mondays. However, Shibby, we start to wind down this show a little, more go a little more broader scope, right? We can take a look here. We are obviously playing with how the patches start to affect Division 1 week to week. I just kind of want to pick your brain a bit here. Also, partly to everyone likes to meme because Shibby's such a big Marvel Rivals guy. Like, oh yeah, Shibby. Oh, he started to slack on League. Nah, bro. This guy's locked in on League all the time. Locked in on the patches on Div 1. So like, I want to pick your brain, man. Like, how are you feeling about this meta as we start to shift on this current patch into week 4 for Div 1?
I think we're going to be heading back into an AP jungler meta, right? Brand gets buffed,
Okay.
Diana gets buffed, Lilia gets buffed. Like AD mid laners, like, hey, Flocon's licking his lips. He's like, I have to play AD mid laners? Oh, baby. And I'm really interested to see all these junglers in Division 1 swap over to playing AP junglers because it's not prototypical for these guys. They're not playing a ton of Brand. They're not playing the Zyra. They're not regularly rotating these champions, right? AP junglers, especially with Brand and Lilia, like we could even throw Morgana, Diana, Zyra, all these kind of AP champions, they're not in their wheelhouse typically. They've only recently, in the last couple, I would say year or two, have been more frequent. But again, we know that patch cycles are cyclical. These guys are much more used to playing stuff like Sejuani, who's always going to find her way back into the meta, right? Lee Sin, Vi, Jarvan, these kinds of champions that you're going to have tons and tons of practice on. I'm expecting to see some of those bubble teams really start busting out some of these AP junglers and surprise some of these guys because maybe they're not on point. Maybe they're not screaming it like Brand's back, Diana's back. I'm very interested in that aspect. Corki, I believe, got a buff, so you can run Corki with the AP mid laners or AP junglers. Sorry, like. If you haven't noticed, Riot is very much intentional with how they want to slightly nudge people into the meta. And when you buff all these AP junglers and then you buff Corki and then you buff, you nerf stuff like Pantheon, like they're essentially telling you, hey guys, this is kind of how we want you to play the game. This is kind of better. So start getting on it.
Should be one of the things I adore about you is your long-winded speeches. So I did want to interrupt you in the middle of it. Corki did get nerfed, slightly nerfed, but hey, you know what? Listen, I think Riot might have also just been like, this is kind of a my bad, guys. Kind of overinflated key on a jungle for Worlds patch. I gotta cover it up. All right, let's give some love to the AP junglers. So I'm glad that you shouted that up. Except for Diana, that champion, screw off, tormenting my solo queue game. So I don't care about Diana. But hey, this leads into our last little talk here, Shibby. We want to talk about players to watch. I'm going to use your AP Jungler's point for this one. My player to watch is a Lilia connoisseur himself. Our match of the week here, I'm going to shout out Maddie here, St. Clair. This guy is a demon on the Lilia when he wants to pull it off and is, like you mentioned earlier, an integral cog in the system that is these really strong and aggressive solo lanes in Maddie and Flocon. So if you get him a Lilia game, Flocon gets on Yone, Maddie can play whatever he wants in the top lane. it's Maddie it's kind of like holding the leash on those feral dogs of those solo laners. So in this matchup against the Buckeyes, he's my player to watch here, knowing everything we've talked about, the meta and the matchup in general.
Well, you stole my player to watch. It's fine. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
Let's
I
go.
mean,
hey, great minds think alike.
Yeah, I mean, we're some of the biggest fans of SEC, right? Like we are the St. Clair Saints. I love watching them, and I love how they operate in League of Legends. But I will kind of go another direction, and my eyes are on Keaton because I really like this guy. Multi-season challenger. I don't think he's had a season where he hasn't ended challenger in the past like 5 or 6 years. I love what Stony Brook's doing. I'm a big fan of that program and what they've been able to prove time and time again and again. And I'm a really, really big fan of how they operate. And I think putting Keaton in those more, like you said, oppressive positions where he can really flex some of those ranged versus melee matchups, where he can really get in deep into his bag, because he does have some really weird picks. I've seen this guy bust out. Yeah, I'm keeping my eyes on Keaton. I know they have a tough matchup. I know they're playing up against not tough matchup, but I know that they have a trap game that I talked about. This is where Keaton can say, yeah, this isn't a trap game. I'm just going to completely flex my support prowess, and I'm going to show you why my bag is so deep and why I can play stuff like Bard, Nico. I can play the weird stuff. Hell, I'll go Silas support or something wacky like that. Like, this guy is an insane player.
Well, if that doesn't sell you even more so on the Sunday slate of Division One, I don't know. You've got a player to watch from Stony Brook. That's the second Sunday match from Shibby. And then, of course, I talked about Maddie in the St. Clair slot, our prime time matchup. Ohio State, St. Clair on Sunday, October 5th. I believe that will be going down at 5:30 Eastern. I believe that's a 2:30 start time for us West Coasters. So that's the matchup you're going to want to watch. That does, in fact, wrap up this episode of Tilt Proof. I believe episode 3. Yeah. So episode 3, Tilt Proof, the debut of myself and Shibby. I forgot to say it, Shibby, because we were talking so much, but I will be on the Winthrop Boise State series. That will be my casting debut. So make sure to come tune into that one in case, again, you have no idea who I am until I came on to Tilt Proof. I swear I do cast League of Legends. So I'll be on that matchup. Obviously, can always find and make sure to check out division1.gg. Awesome hub that has your, pick'ems you can do for all these players in their matchups, shows you all the stats we've been shouting out, schedule, and of course, where to watch all of these matches as we look to get towards a pretty big halftime point here when it comes to Division 1 season. Our next episode, Tilt Proof, will have a lot of fun superlatives and stuff, but Shibby, before we get on out of here, do you have any final thoughts for the faithful watching at home?
Keep watching Division 1. Do your pick'ems, guys. Pick'ems are so fun. Pick'ems are so fun. It definitely scratches the itch for me in League of Legends, especially because we don't really have that kind of stuff. At the tier 1 level or even the tier 2 level. So the fact that Division 1 has implemented pick'ems, it's really fun. The website is really good. I love being able to navigate through and just be like, oh yeah, I can do this, this, and this, and this. The over-unders, all that stuff. Do your pick'ems. I have a lot of fun talking about them on cast and really just being more involved with Division 1. I think there's a lot of ways that other leagues kind of drop the ball here when it comes to being more integrated and involved with your league. And I think Division 1 has taken all the right steps in that regard of like doing the pick'ems, having the player interviews, doing all the journalistic stuff, all the back end stuff. There's so much work going into this league to keep you guys connected that I'm genuinely excited. And I think the only way this works is if you guys stay connected, and the only way this works is if you guys stay engaged within your collegiate esports program. So whether it's League of Legends, Valorant, whatever, I mean, just do it. Just have fun with it and do all the weird stuff. Do all the pick'ems. Do all the random stuff that Division 1 is out there. Interact with everything, because that's what's going to make this league one of the best out there.
Love it. I love it, Shibby. Yeah, the only thing I'd tack on there as my final thought is this is innovation for Division 1 is going to continue coming, and I'm excited to kind of lean into the collegiate program history that some of these guys bring. Listen, Maryville, Winthrop, St. Clair, these are schools that have been dominating CLOL for a while. That's how their programs can lean on. But again, like name value of Ohio State, of Boise State, like West Virginia, these are programs, athletic, esports based, that are always trying to find edges and compete to the highest level in wherever they push an avenue through, even League of Legends, even Valorant. So keep watching these guys, especially because I know they are not going to be happy with where their records are at now, and they're going to look to try and continue to put up more and more of a fight. So that's what I'm most excited to see for here. as we move into week 4. Obviously, you'll have a tilt proof back for week 4. We will have some very fun superlatives. Maybe talk MVPs. We talked a little bit about maybe Flowcon, some big Maryville guys. We're going to have all that and more in store. And maybe start talking about playoff action as well as the top 6 picture starts to sort of focus up a bit more. But until then, make sure to tune in to the matchups for week 4, Sunday and Monday per usual. I've been Slayer, that's Shibby. Big shout out to Froggo helping us run all the things behind the scenes, and we'll see you next time when we see you. Take care, everybody.